All right, so I'm getting ready to get the other bike ready for the state inspection, the 883, which is the only one I have tags on right now. I don't have tags on BMW, don't have tags on that bike because it's no point in paying insurance for it and keeping tags on it if I'm not using it. So state inspections, they're different between every state. Here, they're North Carolina, they're fairly rudimentary inspection, tread depth on the tires, turn signals work, headlight works, brake light works, and exhaust system supposedly supposed to be stock or close to stock, but I don't think anybody actually really goes by that. So an inspection for in name only, so they can charge you money to give you a sticker that says, yeah, it's inspected, which, that kind of inspection doesn't really tell you anything at all. Now, I was an inspector for years and years and years, part of my job. And when I started in Maryland anyway, the state inspection was fairly rigorous. Not fairly, it was rigorous. The bike comes in, you record the mileage, of course, and verify the VIN number with the registration. So no biggie there. You're looking at paperwork and the mileage, and that's about it. But then, you're taking your little tire tread depth gauge and you're measuring the front tire, the rear tire. If it's got a sidecar, you're measuring the tire on that. And then you have to actually measure the brake pad thickness and record it front and rear. And then you have to measure the rotor thickness, front and rear, and write that down. And you're jacking the back of the bike up. You're checking the wheel bearings, checking the swing arm bearings, and then you're jacking the front of the bike up and you're checking the steering head bearings for play, or if it actually turns. Some bikes you got a notchy bearing, so you always feel that notch in it. If the bearings are toast, and that's a failure right there, by the way. And checking the steering head bearings if they're too tight or too loose or whatever, and you're checking the wheel bearings in the front. And you're checking the brakes front and rear, not just for fluid level, leaks. If the lines are cracked, weather cracked, dry rotted, whatever, even if they're not leaking, that's a failure. Fuel lines. Everything else in there. So fairly rigorous inspection. Then you have to take the bike out and ride it in the parking lot. And we just had a couple of brake markers set up in the parking lot. So you accelerate to so many miles an hour. The bike would have to stop within. Anyway, you ride the bike and it has to, where your brake markers are, you run it up to whatever mile an hour it was. And then it has to stop within so many feet within them two brake markers to verify that it's actually brakes work, not just that it has them. And the one that always killed me was you would have to measure, say it had ape hangers on there, you would have to measure from the top of the seat to the top of the bars. And it couldn't be more than so many inches between those two. If it was taller than that, you were supposed to fail it. Or if it was too low, if the bars were mounted down here, all the way down too low on the fork tubes, you'd fail it. Same thing. Tail light couldn't be less than 18 inches off the ground or more than 36. Same way with the headlight. Headlight had to be so many inches off the ground. And your headlight, we had basically put a big cross on the garage door and put a mark on the floor, so you would pull the bike up there, and that was 25 feet or whatever it was. I want to say 25 feet. And then you would shine the low beam at this mark, and on the low beam, it had to be, the top of the low beam had to be the center of that center of that mark, and then you'd adjust it up or down or left or right or whatever it was. So fairly rigorous inspection as far as everything on the bike. But what they did in the back of the manual, and I remember going through the class there for the state police, that you as the inspector can fail a bike for anything you deem unsafe, even if it's not in the manual, which never really paid attention to until our local guy, which is a retired state policeman that works for the DMV, come by and we're talking, and he told me straight up, if you don't think it's safe, man, don't pass it. We'll just refer whoever it is to me, and we'll handle it from there. Okay. So I had a guy bring a FLH in, like 76, 77 FLH, custom, whatever, you know. I mean, it was a good looking bike, but it wasn't going to pass inspection at all. And first thing, bars were okay. Everything was okay as far as that. But the brakes, I go out to get on it, and front brake is like nothing. And guy's standing there, I'm like, I told him, I said, man, this thing ain't got no front brakes. It's going to fail. He says, no, it's got front brakes. You just have to pump them up. It's a failure, period. So, you know, he wants to argue about it. I'm like, whatever. You know, you don't know. You're failing even worse now. Takes it out in the parking lot and puts some fluid in it to get it working. Does it himself. Okay. It's like, front brakes work now. Okay, cool. Now I got to ride it. And then he's like, what do you mean you got to ride it? Well, that's part of the state inspection. No, it didn't. Wants to argue about everything. I'm a state inspector. There's nothing in there that says that you have to ride the bike. I think I know what it says in the manual. You're supposedly a state inspector. I don't know you from Adam, man. So I take the bike out to ride it. It runs fine enough and all that. But the problem was, when he did the front end on it, the steering lock was like, you could move the bars not very far. For instance, you could move the bars probably, so I go to get on the bike and say that's straight right there. I can move the bars maybe that far this way, and maybe that far that way. Well, how are you going to turn that thing around in a parking lot? You're not. Take you forever. So I failed it for that, and I failed it for the brakes too, because you don't conveniently leave fluid out of it. It's going somewhere. Maybe you left it out, maybe it didn't, but the brakes didn't work, and the back brake kind of sort of worked. It was spongy. You had to pump it up, meaning the master cylinder needed to be rebuilt too. Typical 70s Harley Davidson with the Lester brake up front and cast iron master cylinder down at the bottom. So I failed it. And then the guys wanting to argue about, you can't fail it, and you can't do this. And I'm calling the state police. And, you know what? Effing call them, man. Call them. Bring them. I'll call them and tell them to come here. So he did call them. And how I know is the inspector, the local inspector that oversaw those inspection stations around that part of the state, calls me up a couple hours later and wants to know if I had this bike there and if I failed it. And I'm like, yeah, I failed it. And he asked me why I failed it. I said, you couldn't turn the damn thing around in a football field. The steering stem locks were too damn close together. That and the brakes were, told him the story about the brakes. The rear brake was spongy, and the front brake, he had to fill the master cylinder up just to have brakes at all. And, screwed around with it for 20, 30 minutes in the parking lot to get it to work. And then he told me he's some kind of state inspector for cars or somewhere. And inspector goes, he ain't an inspector, man. I already looked. He's just trying to get one over on you. Okay. So he asked, VIN number and all that, and I gave him the VIN number. And I said, why, what's up? He's like, well, he's threatening, he's going to call a lawyer and do this and do that and do the other thing because you failed his bike for not being safe to ride. I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? I'd fail it again. He said, you don't have to. They flagged his VIN number, so anywhere you guys get it inspected, they can't inspect it. It has to go directly to the Maryland State Headquarters for DMV to be inspected by a state trooper. I'm like, good. So in essence, what they're going to do when those guys do an inspection, it's actually harder than a real state inspection because they're going to check the VIN numbers all the way down to the case numbers to make sure the case numbers match each other. They're going to check transmission. They're going to check everything on that bike from front to back. And if they find one thing that's off, they'll confiscate the bike. Now, does that make me a bad person for doing that? Not particularly, no. I don't think it does. And I'll tell you why. As an inspector, and I'm not one now and haven't been one for a number of years now, probably 8 years. Haven't been an inspector for 8 years, ever since I had a stroke. And that's when I quit working about 8 years ago. But anyway, as an inspector, if you do something wrong, you're passing bikes that shouldn't be passed or whatever, that's on you. That's not on the customer. That's a $10,000 fine and up to a year in jail, or both. Don't come into a damn shop trying to bribe a damn, your bike fails because your brake light doesn't work. And the guy, oh man, come on, it's just a brake light. I'll fix it. We'll fix it and come back. That's your option. I'm not passing it. I don't know you from Adam. Because what does happen, and duly noted, that police being police, they will actually take bikes that they've confiscated, or cars. They do the same thing with cars, and they'll go into whatever inspection station knowing that they're going to fail, trying to bust people that are trying to make a living, or they'll pull this one. I had one come in the shop one time in Maryland, and had a guy working there that was retired state policeman, and he comes over to me. The guy drops his bike off, wrote the work order. It's just an inspection, and he comes over to me and goes, "What's that guy want?" He says, "I said, why? He just wants an inspection." He said, "You better fail it." I'm like, "Why is that, man?" Guy's a cop, man. Works for the License and Theft Bureau. Meaning he's in the inspection business there for the state police. Sure shit, I failed it because it failed. It was little simple things. It was like left turn signal didn't work and the brake light didn't work. Tail light was fine, headlight was fine. So I failed it. And then this guy comes over and he starts talking. He's like, "Man, can't you just pass it for that and I'll fix it?" I'm like, "Nah, can't do it. Can't do it, man." So he starts getting kind of uppity about it. Well, I'll slide you some money if you just let it slide. I'm like, "Nah, can't do it, man. Just can't do it." He's like, "Why not?" "Because it's freaking illegal. That's why. Get the hell out of my shop." And he just stood there and looked at me like, puffed all up. Like, "Get out of here." I went and opened the garage door and wheeled the bike outside. Escorted him up to the front to pay. I said, "You pay up front there at the parts counter." So, just realize whatever state you're in that, God's just trying to make money. Because what happens, what happens? You get a $10,000 fine and you're in jail. You think your job's going to be there when you get back? It isn't. So, you're kind of screwing yourself with that. And especially somebody you don't know, that even if you do know them, you don't need to be passing it. You know, the way our litigious society is, you know, say the rear tire on this Beamer here was sketchy, like didn't have cord shelling, but it was low. You know, so it was less than 2/32. So it still had barely any tread at all, just barely. So you pass it, guy goes out and wrecks his bike, kills himself, whatever, gets in a wreck, gets mangled or maimed, whatever happens. Well, now this guy might not sue you, but you don't know about his wife, parents, grandparents, kids, whatever. They'll sue the hell out of you. You know, and then the state's going to be going, why in the hell did you pass that bike? Because they're going to look at it. They're going to say, well, it didn't have no tread on the back tire. And they're going to look at, well, it was just inspected by you yesterday or today. You know, what are you going to say? Oh, I don't know. So when you go in to get your bike inspected, don't think the guy's there trying to screw you out of whatever. You know, state inspections don't pay very much money at all. Never have. I think they're like $13 here or something. And the guy doing the inspection maybe gets $9 out of that, something like that, and the rest of it goes to the state. So it isn't really worth the time to be doing it. You're losing money by doing inspections, especially for somebody that doesn't want to fix anything on their bike, you know. And you know, tires are tires, you know, but, you know, a guy comes in and needs front tire, needs rear tire, it needs them. You know, that's for your safety, at least according to the state it is. You know, don't give the guys at the inspection station a hard time. They got other crap they'd be rather do than looking at your bike for an inspection. Like I said, every state's a little bit different. We don't do emissions here. We did before, not on bikes, but on cars. And they've since quit doing emissions on cars recently. And actually anything over, I forget what it is now, anything over 25 years old doesn't require an inspection. It might be 20 now. Somebody told me they just changed it. I haven't looked. But, so which is better? The problem with Maryland was, yeah, it was a very thorough inspection. Very thorough. Yeah, I mean, you're basically checking over the entire bike. And it ain't for free. You're actually paying more money for doing it. I want to say it was $30 or something like that. It's like $31 or something. So it was more than just a simple check the lights and push it out the door and that's it. But that thorough inspection was good for however long you had tags on the bike, which, you know, that can be good or bad. You know, if you had the bike for 30 years and you had it inspected 30 years ago, ain't no way that thing's the same as it was 30 years ago. Versus somewhere that does an inspection, a little rudimentary inspection once a year, like in North Carolina here. They, it's just different, you know, which is better. And, you know, they might have changed up there since then because it's been 25 years ago. Anyway, as far as you doing an inspection, if something's broken on your bike, fix it. You know, before you have to go to inspection. Or some states will actually pull you over for that stuff. I had, when I first started riding street bikes, a long time ago, had a bike with drag pipes on it. And it was loud, and I lived in a small city outside of DC there. So first time I get pulled over, cop walks up. You know how they used to have these billy clubs they always carried? So guy's got his billy club out, and he walks over the bike and kind of leans over like that, takes the billy club, slams it all the way up the damn drag pipe. He goes, oh, they ain't got no baffles. I have to write you a ticket. So he writes me a ticket, which is, it's just sad. It's just a ticket. You go to get it, you take it to an inspection station, And they sign off on it that you put baffles in there, or you got your headlight fixed or tail light or whatever it was. And within a week, I got pulled over again. And this lady cop, bad attitude lady cop, comes over and she does the same thing, grabs her nightstick out, bends over, boop, jams it in the pipe, writes me another safety ticket. It's like, damn, really got to get it fixed now. And all it does is like a postcard, and you fill the inspector signs it, and then you mail it into or that's the way you did it, 40 years ago. You mail it into the state police there. So next time I got pulled over, I never put baffles in there. I got smart. I took where the rear pipe is, I took and drilled a 1/4-inch hole about 6 inches up in the pipe and stuck a 1/4-inch bolt up through there. So next time it happened, guys like, damn, it does have baffles in it. And really, that's all I got about state inspections. Like I said, it's different from every state. It'd be different. North Carolina is different than Virginia is different from South Carolina, different from Georgia, different from California, Texas, Connecticut, wherever. They're all different slightly. Some states don't even have them. I want to say there for a while there, West Virginia didn't have inspections, but that's a long time ago. So I don't know if they do or not. They didn't have motorcycle licenses either. But that's about it. Let me try and get some stuff done now. You're running my mouth. You guys have a fantastic weekend, and thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing, comments, everything else. And everybody have a fine damn weekend. Take care.